within the world of entertainment and within the world of movies, one of the biggest stories involving the whole pandemic and COVID thing has been, again, remember, just talking within this little box of the world of movies, one of the biggest stories has been the plight of AMC theaters and the trouble that they have been in. And they have been in a lot of trouble. Now, look, every single movie theater chain in the world has been in trouble and is in trouble because of the pandemic. How can you be a business when you have no product and no customers? Now, you try being a fish market with nobody there to buy fish, and even if they were there to buy fish, you don't have any fish to sell them. That is the scenario, that is the predicament that the good folks at AMC, Regal, Cineworld, Cinemark, you name it, that's the position they all find themselves in. AMC has been in a particularly bad spot, though. They've been in it a little particularly worse, and we'll cover why in just a minute. But now the urgency of how bad their situation is and the imminence of how close they're getting to the cliff has become a little bit more clear in the statements they put out themselves. Now, this comes to us from the folks at Variety who write, AMC Theaters, the world's largest cinema chain, has issued a sobering warning as the coronavirus pandemic stretches into winter. We're running out of money. In an SEC filing on Friday, the struggling movie theater company warned its resources may be drained as early as next month. That's January. In the absence of additional liquidity, the company anticipates that existing cash resources will be depleted during January of 2021. Whether that's the beginning of January, end of January, mid-January, not sure. But their cash resources will be depleted by January of 2021, the company wrote. This is not good. Now, listen, there's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride going on with AMC, right? Certain things happen. And AMC stock skyrocketed for a bit. And then like Warner Brothers announces all their 2021 movies are going to go to HBO Max and their stock crashed. Then Disney announced a number of their big projects are still going to go to theaters. Their stock recovered a bit and all that kind of stuff. So AMC has been going through this nauseating roller coaster ride up and down, up and down, up and down. Let's take a look at what makes their predicament particularly bad right now. Let's jump into the Campea classroom for a second and see how this is particularly bad right now. The first thing to understand why they were in kind of a rougher position than a lot of the other theater chains was because prior to the pandemic starting, all right, they were $5 billion in debt. Now, the reason they were in debt, why were they in debt? Because they just spent tons of money. See, what they were doing, money. What was happening was prior to the pandemic hitting, AMC Theaters was doing quite well. And they were going through a massive expansion. They had bought new theaters. Their existing theaters, they were doing this massive programming of ripping out all the guts of the existing theaters, replacing them with new screens, most importantly, new leather motorized reclining chairs and sound systems. Seriously, it's one of the best upgrades to the movie-going experience ever. Those have been awesome. I've loved going into those theaters with the big leather recliners. It's been great. But they've been spending tons of money on that and spending even more money on their transition to becoming a subscription-based service with AMC A-List, right? Their AMC A-Listing, pay $25 a month, get 12 movies a month. Go up to 3 movies every week for $25 a month. It's crazy. It is I've called it the best deal for film fans ever. Best deal for film fans ever. But it costs them a lot of money to get that program up and running. And just before the pandemic hit, AMC announced that their program was now starting to turn a profit, and it was going to just continue to build huge profits for them. But then the pandemic hit. And once the pandemic hit, it all went to crap. And unfortunately, it hit just as they hit the peak of their debt of $5 billion. Now, this is all stuff we've covered before. But why their position is even more precarious now is this. Right now, because they couldn't generate any revenue because of no movies, right? They couldn't pay their rent. So right now, AMC is in the hole for rent for $400 million. What we've got to remember here is that AMC does not own the vast majority of their theaters. They don't own them. They lease those theaters. They rent those theaters. Because most theaters in this country, like, are a part of a mall or a part of a big shopping center or whatever. AMC doesn't own those buildings. They don't own those structures. They have to pay huge amounts of rent on those structures. Now, what has happened is in 2020, AMC worked out a deal with most of their landlords to say, look, you've got to allow us to not pay rent right now. Let us defer our rent until later. Because we don't have the money to pay rent. We don't have the money to pay rent. So can we defer these payments? So they were able to defer the payments. But those payment deferments have added up right now to $400 million in outstanding rent payments that they've got to make to these leaseholders. So that just makes a bad position even worse already. Another thing to consider, AMC has said we need $750 million to stay open. In this statement they put out, they acknowledge that for us to be able to keep going into 2021, we need to come up with $750 million. Not just for the back rent, but just for basic operational needs. We need to come up with $750 million. Here's the problem they face, right? This is the problem we face. Who is going to give them money right now? Who's going to give them money? They came up with a bunch of investors a couple of months ago to get themselves a little bit more money to keep things going. But the further and further into debt they fall, who's going to step up and give them more money? That becomes the question. Their position has become precarious. What should we call it? One sign of hope is Disney. Now, of course, Disney just did their big announcement stuff the other day. And as a part of their announcements, they said a bunch of our high profile, big blockbuster movies are still going to go to theaters. I predicted Black Widow was going to go to Disney Plus. I didn't know that it was going to do that, but I really believed it was. And it didn't. They said, nope, we're keeping this thing theatrical. And then they listed a whole bunch of other movies that are going to go theatrical. That in and of itself might make some investors go, oh, maybe there is some hope here. I'm not saying it will. I'm just saying, seeing Disney say, we're going to still release a lot of our movies in theaters. And now maybe potential investors seeing that Legendary, the Directors Guild, the Actors Guild, the CAA of the agencies, their actors are all rebelling against Warner Brothers right now because of their announcement that they were going to put all their 2021 movies on HBO Max. Some investors may look at that and go, well, Disney said they're going to continue to put their big blockbusters out in theaters. Maybe Warner Brothers may backtrack on what they're doing. And because it's gotten bad. Did you guys see Timothy Chalamet too on Saturday Night Live? On the closing part of Saturday Night Live, he busted out this Legendary studio sweater. Of course, Legendary is taking Warner Brothers to court over their decision to move Dune to HBO Max, and all the actors hate it, and the director Denis Villeneuve hates it. So, I mean, there's that. So that might lead some investors or some equity companies at some point to say, hey, you know what? Maybe it is a good bet to put some money into AMC right now. While their stocks are low, let's get in, infuse it with cash, buy heavy. Let's see what happens. I don't know. There might be a light at the end of the tunnel, but the things with AMC have gotten very, very precarious. On top of that $5 billion in debt that they were already carrying, now they got $400 million in deferred rent payments, and they're going to have to start paying rent again. That $400 million is on top of the rent they just got to continue to pay. Saying they need to come up with $750 million. Look, I'm not ready to make any complete pronouncements yet. I don't think anybody should be. But there's no denying right now that things don't look good for AMC.